Hey class, we're going to go ahead and get started with our last lecture in our careers block. So I'll share my screen and we'll get started with this topic. We are looking at teaching physical education and coaching. So, first thing is understanding what pedagogy is. This word sport pedagogy we use to describe those who study how to teach, learn, instruct physical activity, physical education, or sports. When going into a sport pedagogy program, most of the time it's paired with teaching certificates. So you can concurrently work on your degree while still taking courses to earn your certificate to go into teaching. So let's talk about what careers are available for those who study sport pedagogy. So first is to become a teacher, and most of these teachers will teach a variety of courses. It could be anything from physical education to health courses to other courses that need to be taught where you would have to get a different certificate for. You can go into being a coach where you are coaching sports for a certain school, middle school, high school, and then probably also teaching classes on the side as well. You can be an instructor at a corporate or community fitness center, recreation leaders, special skill instructors, or you can become a professor and a researcher. So let's talk about those who plan to go into pedagogy or being a physical education teacher. What are some things that we want to focus on at different levels of school? So first, starting with elementary school programs, one of the biggest things is understanding the developmental readiness of children and doing playing games and having certain activities that are geared towards that young age group. What we're also doing at this time is learning how to do skills, starting with the simplest skills and progressing to more complex skills. Along with that, we're trying to establish basic fitness concepts, anything from learning about flexibility to cardiovascular endurance to muscle strength to muscle endurance. And as we're teaching those basic fitness complex concepts, we're teaching them skills that they would do in order to improve those physical outcomes. Some other curricula would include rhythmic activities like dancing, different types of stunts, games, basic sports skills, relays. Think of like field day that you did when you were younger. Think of like the PE courses that you had growing up and all the different fun activities that you played where you're being physically active, but the kids don't really think of it as exercise. They just think of it as play and fun. And so that's the goal at this age. Once we get into middle school, we have to understand that children this age or adolescents this age, we'll call them, are in a transitional period. So we are focusing on their developmental needs of the student during this transition from like early grade school to high school. So during this time, what we're doing is helping with personal and social behaviors. So teaching them how to be an appropriate teammate, how to take on characteristics of a sports person or an athlete. We're using different curricula that would help with fundamental sport skills while still incorporating a lot of what we saw in those elementary programs, just now they're more advanced. Think of different types of games, dances, and then outdoor activities and outdoor sports. What we're doing here is we're also trying to prep and prime the student to be able to play more advanced sports in high school and maybe college. And so that's kind of the goal at this point. Guys. Next is high school programs. So what the curricula focuses here is developing and maintaining a health enhancing level of physical fitness. This can be done several ways, but what we're doing is we're introducing them to a variety of activities that they can do in practice and participate kind of for the rest of their lives. We want them to commit to lifelong physical activity. We want to show them all the different types of aerobic activities that are available and out there and different sports and activities that they can do throughout their entire life. We've talked about kind of lifelong or life-term sports before. This is anything from like golf or tennis, pick up basketball games. This is pickleball, anything recreation-wise. So like climbing or hiking or biking. to swimming, jogging, all of those different activities that you can kind of do for the rest of your life. This is probably the most important is because after high school, the student goes out to college and then they get to make their own decisions on what they want to do. But we want to instill in them the desire and the habit to continue their physical activity programs. So, question I want you to think about for this lecture is what does it mean to be a successful PE teacher and what is needed to run a good program? And so, think about the successful teachers that you've had or successful coaches that you've had growing up. And what did they do? How did they teach? How did they influence you to be physically active? So when I answer this question, I think a successful PE teacher knows how to cater to their audience and knows exactly the clientele, the population that they're working with, and they know the appropriate games, activities, and sports for that age group. What's needed to run a good program is obviously a space, a safe space, either indoors or outdoors, preferably both, and then also equipment, which means we need funds, which means we need support from the school or whatever community center that we're in. So we do need monetary funds in order to purchase equipment and then a safe place to be, and support from parents, faculty, teachers. Okay, now transitioning to coaching and sport instruction. And so first we want to talk about what is the goal of coaching and sport instruction. So our overall goal is to improve like sport performance, skill performance, and fitness. Um, we want to help participants in these different settings to develop, maintain modest to high level of motor skills and improve like their overall fitness. How is this reached? Well, most coaches and instructors have a lot of experience and practice designing programs. And so the goal is reached through well-designed practices, practice sessions, and conditioning. We want to basically explain everything that we're doing, everything we're offering to the students, to the athletes. We want to make sure that our instruction is high enough for all the students to understand what we're trying to get across, making sure that our verbal and visual feedback is appropriate in order for the athlete to understand what we are trying to get them to do and the feedback that we're trying to give them to improve their skills. So yeah, just know what the goal is and how that goal is reached. So let's talk about the difference between instructors, so sport instructors and coaches. With a sport instructor, more time is spent with instructional responsibilities, such as disseminating knowledge about a sports skill and modeling that behavior, showing them how to do a certain skill, teaching them kind of all the different ways that you can approach that sport or that skill that you're trying to master. Coaches spend a lot of more time on supplemental responsibilities, recruiting, review films, scheduling budgets, fundraising, etc. One thing I also want you to think about difference in sport instructors are sometimes for hire by parents of young athletes or for hire by someone in a community where they want to perfect a sports skill. Whereas coaches, we see more in like interscholastic programs. Think of just athletics. Think of high school, middle school coaches that you've had, where those coaches, yes, they are coaching your team, but they also have other responsibilities they have to do in order to run a athletic program. So let's look a little closer at this Venn diagram and look over here, the active sport instructing. Most of the time, specific instructional activities for promoting learning in novices. So these are people who don't have a lot of skill. They may be new to the sport or they're just trying to perfect this skill. Whereas we see over here, the active coaching designed to improve performance in elite athletes. These elite athletes we see, I mean, we can't really call a middle school or high school athlete elite, but you kind of get the idea that coaches are working more with teams to improve overall performance Whereas a sport instructor usually works with one person or maybe a few people in like a sport clinic to perfect a sport skill. So let me give you an example. Growing up, I had a sport instructor and they helped me with my golf swing. So I was no means on the golf team in high school and didn't really play much, but parents wanted me to know how to swing a golf club and know the correct way to hit a golf ball, etc. So they hired a golf pro, which kind of what they call them, or just like golf instructor, to help with my swing. I also had a tennis instructor. So no, I was not on the tennis team in high school, but my mom hired a sport instructor, a tennis pro, to help me with my forehand and my backhand. And so that's an example of like a sport instructor helping like a novice person like myself improve my skill. And then I also had coaches when I was, let's say, on the soccer team in high school. We had different coaches that works with the actual team, but coaches we know also have other activities besides just teaching the skill or teaching sports. They have things such as like managing the facility, they have recruiting, they have budgets to do, they have what else do they have to do? Reviewing film, just other activities like that. Sometimes, depending on if we're looking at like a middle school, high school, or college athletic department, there are other people hired to do those supplemental activities so the coach can actually just focus on coaching. All right, let's look at our settings for coaches. So community settings are most of the time are civic minded. Civic minded means we're basically caring for the people of the community, and they're usually not for profit. And so first goal is improvement, social, physical, moral development of local community through physical activity. So for example, if you've ever played like a rec league, which rec leagues are just recreational leagues, usually the coaches for those rec leagues are not getting paid. They're volunteer opportunities. And so community settings could be anything from like a rec league that's held in the city or the town. It could also be through a church league or the YMCA. Most of these times, these coaches or these instructors aren't getting paid. These are voluntary positions. Institutional settings is probably what you're most familiar with, your middle school, your high school, college, university settings, where we have these coaches that are several different coaches, probably, that are working with the athletes. And then commercial sports settings, these are for hire by elite athletes. These are like the sport instructors that are working with elite athletes, maybe to help them to qualify for the 2026 LA Olympics, to where they want to improve their 400-meter time. They'd hire a coach to come and work with them on, improving their skill. Settings for these arenas, stadiums, practice facilities of professional teams. And so these elite athletes, professional athletes would hire individuals to come work with them. Again, like I said, this could also be kind of the example I gave about hiring like a tennis pro or a golf pro to help with my swing. I'm not by any means an elite athlete, but that is still something where you could bring in a sport instructor to help with a skill. How can we become a coach or a sport instructor? So, first, you need a degree in a kinesiology related field. And then, you want to gain practical experience. This is where internships are very important. And so, going to shadow a coach, being with the coach, and kind of seeing what they do on a day-to-day basis. Choose an area or a specialty. So this could be anything from you really just want to focus on PE, and instead of being a coach, you want to be a PE instructor and work with younger children, building up those sports skills, building up their confidence, and helping them to kind of excel, and be really confident in their physical activity ability. Or this is where you may want to specialize and become a football coach or a tennis coach or a soccer coach. So finding what area you think you have enough knowledge on, maybe you played that sport in high school growing up, or you're just really fascinated by it and want to know more about it. And so choosing an area or specialty. And then obtaining certifications. So there are several different certifications. This one is just an example, the National Coach Certification Program. So if you Google that name right there, it'll bring you to its websites, and there's lots of different certifications that you can look into. There's also certifications based on sport. So there's like a level 1 soccer coach all the way up to like level 6 soccer coach. Or soccer instructor. There's, baseball, basketball, every sport has some sort of like certification program that basically says that you know kind of the information that you're disseminating to the students or to the athletes. Joining organizations is also really important for networking, for learning more about different sports and different coaching strategies. This is just an example of an association down here at the bottom, the Texas High School Coach Association. They have a really great website that you could look into and basically just see what they're offering. So if you plan to go into coaching at the high school level, or if that's where you want to start, looking into that association is a great resource for you. And then pursuing job opportunities. Job opportunities are growing. There are lots of different high schools, middle schools across the country. You know, if you're looking just to stay in Texas, Texas as well. And think about all the different sports and all the different types of coaches, head coach, assistant coach. With coaching, you probably start at the bottom. Think of like the assistant coach at a middle school, and then slowly working your way up to the head coach of the middle school football team, and then working your way up to high school, and then hopefully college. And then I know some of you probably want to go into professional leagues. And so, again, just starting at the bottom and working your way up is how coaching usually works. This here looks at surging salaries for football, basketball coaches. This is looking at D1 schools. It's kind of an interesting read. You can kind of read through this and see the highest paid coaches for football, basketball, and the NCAA. And just kind of look at how much they're getting paid. You can kind of scan through this little article, and you can also see that we're in the millions, multimillionaires or multi-million dollar programs hire and pay multi-million dollar coaches. And so just kind of looking through that, and the questions down here at the bottom think, do you think that salaries of these top coaches and professional athletes are fair in terms of their value to the institution or society as a whole? Why or why not? It's interesting because most of the time the head coach of like the football team or basketball team gets paid more than like the president or the chancellor of the university. And some people say like, how is that even fair? How is that even possible? And a lot of times the argument always comes back to, well, how much money is this sport actually bringing into the university? And that coach is in charge of that sport and in charge of the success of that team. And most of the time, that's why they usually get paid more, is based on their success in a program and how much money that they're bringing into it. This here talks about life as a professional sports coach, few jobs, less security. So this kind of goes through and talks about the head coaching positions in the NFL. It also shows you the MLB, the NHL, the NBA, MLS, etc. And it shows you all the different coaches. And then it talks about how a lot of these teams have replaced their head coach. It said 22 replaced their head coach, and 11 did it twice within just like 3 years. So that's where the less security comes in. And that's probably also why these coaches are paid so much, is because let's say they have a losing season and maybe the president or the manager of the team or the owner of the team decides, hey, we want to get a new coach based off your losing season. And so that's where the less security, the jobs or your position, losing your position, getting fired based on how well your team actually does. So yeah, again, kind of interesting. So just kind of know that going into coaching. And even though this says at the professional sport level, we also see this a lot in high schools too. Job prospects are good. Like I said, coaches are always needed. Salaries are low when we talk about middle school, high school, but then those highest levels, like you saw, you can make up into the millions. So depending on kind of where you get into with coaching. And then some questions to ask yourself if you want to get into being a PE teacher or a coach is talking about, are you an entrepreneur? Are you a leader? Obviously, that's number one, is making sure you can lead people and build athletes, create a team. Can you plan and organize? Are you good at strategy development and strategy dissemination? Do you have good judgment? Are you okay with success and failure? And then are you comfortable with others always evaluating you and looking at your performance? And if every time your team loses, it's always your fault. And so those are things to ask yourself. You probably have some experience, maybe with coaching, with a family member or friend that you know of that went into coaching. But we'll have a video that I'll show in just a little bit. It'll be in another video just posted, and you'll be able to watch kind of what a day in the life of a coach is like. Okay, great. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.